On today's show, plenty to gain, plenty to lose. Let's talk about the three players led by Donovan Mitchell on the Cavs with the most to gain from this upcoming season on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find this show everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well and tell a friend to subscribe too. Also, check us out on YouTube. If you're not doing that, just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for me. Make sure you hit subscribe and be sure to click the notification bell so you get the latest Locked On Cavs content as soon as it is available. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Hello again, everybody. I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, a number of other stops along the way. And today, I want to talk about the players that have the most to gain by having a good season for the Cavs this year and what those good seasons would look like. I want to talk about, coming up later in the show, Darius Garland, because I think he's got a lot to gain this year. And I want to talk about Evan Mobley, too. I think he has just as much as almost anybody to gain this year for the Cavs. But the guy that I need to start with, that I think has the most to gain, is Donovan Mitchell. I really believe that. And for a number of different reasons why I'm going to dive into them right now. But Donovan Mitchell, to date, has had the best career of anyone on the Cavs. He's been fantastic. He is an all-NBA level player. He is a perennial all-star. He is somebody that has found himself on MVP ballots at certain point in his career, at certain points in his tenure in Cleveland. He's been that good. But what is Donovan Mitchell's career missing so far? Well, it's missing postseason success. And that is where I think this conversation starts. Because Donovan Mitchell has a lot to gain, but I don't know how much of it is during the regular season. I expect Donovan Mitchell to go out and have another tremendous regular season for the Cavs. That's what he's done. I see no reason at all why that would be any different this year. I think he's going to go out. He'll be an all-star. I suspect he'll be an all-NBA player again, provided he plays the requisite number of games. That happened 2 years ago, didn't happen last year, didn't play enough games, wasn't on the All-NBA team. But if he's healthy and continues playing at the level that he's played at while he's been in Cleveland, I have no reason to believe he won't be an All-NBA player. He's that good. But as you look through his resume, it doesn't maybe have the number of All-NBA mentions that you would think for someone of his caliber. And part of that is the guard position has been loaded throughout his time in the NBA. But it also doesn't have the postseason success. And I'm not talking finals MVPs or championships. I'm talking deep runs into the postseason. Where Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs this past year, they won a series against the Magic. They made it to the second round, where they were then dismissed in 5 games by the eventual world champion Boston Celtics. That's kind of been the story for Donovan's postseason career, where he's been able to pretty consistently get to the second round, especially on a lot of those Utah teams. Those teams were very good. They got to the second round year after year, but they never got past the second round. Donovan Mitchell right now is one of the best players in the NBA that has not made it to a conference finals. There are not very many players. If you want to say, my opinion is that Donovan, since he's been in Cleveland, has been a top 10 player in the league when he's been healthy. I think really no one's going to say he's been anything less than a top 15 player in the league when healthy. Go through the list of top 15 players in the NBA and tell me how many of those players have not made it at least to a conference finals. I'm not saying won a championship. I'm not saying gone to an NBA finals. I'm saying have been on a team that won 2 series in a single postseason. I don't know. I don't have my top 15 list pulled up. I think it's a list that ebbs and flows. But with a lot of those guys, winning is a prerequisite. Maybe Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the one that you can point at. Other than him, I don't know that there's really a lot to say. I don't know how many of those guys that are on Donovan's level or better haven't been to a conference finals. It's not a long list. And that's why I think Donovan Mitchell has the most to gain this year on the Cavs. Because we start talking about Donovan and he is solidified as a great player. But Donovan Mitchell has shown something that no one else on the Cavs has yet. And that's the ability to be more. Donovan Mitchell has the talent, provided that I think he does enough winning and continues on the trajectory he's currently on. He has enough talent to one day be a Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer. That's the type of player we are talking about. That is the type of talent we are talking about. So I went on Basketball Reference, and they have a Hall of Fame probability tool. Basically, you can type in a player, and it will spit out for you the percentage chance that this player makes the Hall of Fame. I looked it up for Donovan Mitchell, and that number is 12.8. Basketball Reference gives Donovan Mitchell a 12.8% chance of making the Hall of Fame. That's not bad. That's, considering basketball history, that's not bad at all. That puts you in the top 1% of all players all time. But it's also something that I think has a lot of room to grow. I do believe that if Donovan Mitchell goes on a deep playoff run or multiple deep playoff runs in Cleveland, that number is going to grow. If he continues to make all NBA teams the way that I believe that he should and will in Cleveland, that number continues to grow. That's what Donovan Mitchell needs to do. But the postseason success, I think, is a prerequisite for that number growing. And because when we talk about, when we bring up Hall of Fame, and I don't even think this is unfair to Donovan because I think he's that good. I do. But when you start talking about that, winning is something that's always mentioned. You don't get to those places. You don't get talked about in that light unless the winning happens. You have to win at a high level. A higher level than Donovan Mitchell has won at so far. That's not to say he can't. It's not to say he won't, because I do believe, whether it's this year or in the coming years, I do believe Donovan Mitchell is going to reach those heights as a basketball player. But because we can have a legitimate conversation about his legacy and about, could he be somebody that is multiple times on all NBA teams, where, 2 years ago he was second team all NBA. I thought he belonged on the first team all NBA. I thought he was one of the 5 or 6 best players in basketball, and that was when positions still mattered on that voting track. I didn't think Luka Doncic should have been first team all NBA that year on a team that finished 11th in the Western Conference. I thought Donovan Mitchell deserved it. I was disappointed that it was not seen that way. The voting results didn't reflect my opinion, but that's life sometimes. But it does take me back to winning, because those all-NBA things, I believe, will come. But if the postseason success comes, and I'm not saying that Donovan Mitchell needs to win 3 championships. I don't even know that Donovan Mitchell needs to win 1 championship. Because you look at some other guys that find themselves in the conversation to be a Hall of Famer at a certain point. Damian Lillard's up there. Now, Damian Lillard has made several all-NBA teams in that isn't a fair comparison to Donovan Mitchell yet. I think at the end of their careers it will be. But Damian Lillard is someone who's not been on a championship team, but he did lead a team to a conference finals, even if that conference finals appearance was a very quick and swift exit at the hand of the Golden State Warriors. But that stuff still matters. It does still matter. And I think that Donovan Mitchell has the ability to achieve that. And that's why I think he's the player on the Cavs that has the most to gain this year. Because if the Cavs go out and have a great season, who's that going to reflect most on? Yeah, it's going to mean a lot for Evan Mobley. It's going to mean a lot for Darius Garland. I'm going to talk about those two coming up on today's Locked On Cavs. It's going to mean a lot for Kenny Atkinson, the new head coach, who's taking over a team that has maybe underachieved a little bit in the postseason the last couple of years compared to the amount of talent they have on the roster. But Donovan Mitchell is the team's MVP. And there's no debate about that. He is the guy that makes this team go. He is the guy that this team depends on. So if Donovan Mitchell is able to lead this team to a conference finals or deeper, I think it does wonders for his legacy. I think it's something that we talk about not only in this town of Cleveland, not only when we talk about this Cavaliers basketball team, but when we talk about Donovan Mitchell as an individual. This season is going to matter for him. He's in the prime of his career. He turned 28 the other day. I don't know how much longer that prime is going to last, and that's why I think that he's got the most to gain from this year. He can very positively impact his legacy in a big way if he goes out this year and leads the Cavs to not just another top 4 seed, but something better than that. If he can lead the Cavs to 55 wins, which I think is a very realistic possibility for this team, and a deep run in the playoffs, I think the conversation about Donovan Mitchell's success as an NBA player, I think that conversation starts to reflect more positively on who he is as a basketball player. And that's why I think he has more to gain on this Cavs team this season than anybody else. I mentioned 2 other guys that I both think have a lot to gain. I'm going to talk about Evan Mobley and what he has to gain, because we know that potential is through the roof. But how does he get there, and what does a good season for Evan Mobley look like? How much exactly does he have to gain? That's straight ahead right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships. It's the same formula that keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're in speed, power, style, all 3 of those things, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And this is very important here, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we know Donovan Mitchell has the most to gain on the Cavs. I think Evan Mobley has the second most to gain on the Cavs. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. And now I want to tell you to make Locked On NBA your second listen of the day, because we know there's no off season in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. Some of those local experts include me. I was on Locked On NBA earlier this week talking about the Cavs. Maybe it's something you didn't get on Locked On Cavs. You got to check it out there. So go find Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's take a look at who Evan Mobley has been so far in his career. What do we know about him? What are the concrete facts we have about Evan Mobley? We know he's immensely talented. There's no questioning that. The potential Evan Mobley has, despite how good Donovan Mitchell is, the potential Evan Mobley has is to be the best player on this basketball team. Whether or not he reaches that potential, that is a sight yet to be seen. That is something we're still waiting on. Now, defensively, I don't know how much more Evan Mobley has to grow. He is obviously one of the best defenders in basketball, whether that is protecting the rim, whether that is as an on-ball defender, whether that is playing sort of that free safety role that the Cavs have had him play while Jarrett Allen can defend the rim. Evan Mobley's great at just about everything defensively. We've seen him do it in the regular season. We've seen him do it in the playoffs. We have seen Evan Mobley very rarely not meet the challenge defensively. He's special on that end of the floor. It's been reflected. He finished third in Defensive Player of the Year. He was on track to be an all-defense player last year before he missed 6 weeks with a knee injury and then missed more time with an ankle injury. Evan Mobley, the defender, cannot be questioned. But what's going to decide how much Evan Mobley gains from this year has everything to do with Evan Mobley, the offensive player. Evan Mobley, the defensive player, is a known commodity. It's a very good commodity, but it's known. Evan Mobley, the offensive player, right now, is still an unknown. We don't know exactly what he's going to be this year. And that's why I think he has the most to gain from this year. Because if Evan Mobley comes out in the 2024-2025 season for the Cavs and lights it up offensively, and let's just say, and I don't want to quantify this into numbers because I think that is sort of unfair with Evan's offensive production. I don't think that the numbers always tell the full story. There can be times in the NBA where a player can score 30 points in a game. But did that really tell the full story of how impactful he was on offense? No. Conversely, there can be times where a player scores 16 points in a game. And that might not tell the full story about how impactful someone was on the offensive end of the floor. So Evan Mobley's numbers could look relatively similar, maybe a slight increase to the last 2 years that he's put together. But that doesn't mean he's the same player as those previous 2 years. I think that the way he's used is going to tell the story about how we feel about Evan Mobley this year and beyond as an offensive basketball player. I would like to see him used more as an offensive hub. I would like to see him have the ability to create for others a little bit more. I would like to see Evan Mobley be able to run out and transition more often than he has in the previous 3 years with the Cavs. Those are all things that if those happen, and Evan Mobley does them well, and I have no reason to believe that he can't do them well. If all those things happen, I think we're talking about Evan Mobley as a potential all-star. Maybe he doesn't make the all-star team this year. I don't know. We have to see how the year goes, obviously. But if he does those things, and he does them at the level, not even at the level he plays defense at, but if he does them at an above-average level, you're talking about an all-star player. You're talking about someone who is in all NBA conversations. That's what Evan Mobley's ceiling is. That's why I think he's in this conversation for players with the most to gain on the Cavs, because his ceiling is so high. He has a potential to hit that he, on offense, I don't think has scratched the surface of. Defensively, yeah, that's a different conversation. But I don't think he has scratched the surface of what he can be offensively. So I think he's got so much to gain there. Not the most to gain, because I think the legacy play with Donovan Mitchell is just a little bit more. But I think in terms of the career trajectory, Evan Mobley has a chance to really push his through the roof. And having a good year this season, I think is something that could do that. Now, what does a good year look like for Evan Mobley? I think it's those things I just talked about. I think it's being in transition more. I think it's making plays for other more. I think it's, in some ways, and you can't quantify this, I think it's becoming a better screen setter offensively, helping to free others up, making other players around him better on the offensive end of the floor. I also think it's being a more willing shooter. I think it's being a more aggressive player. At times, I think Evan Mobley has been a little timid on the offensive end of the floor. If that goes away, I think that's a big success for Evan and for the Cavs on offense. If he is more aggressive on a consistent basis. I'm not saying it's going to be an every night thing, because nothing in the NBA is an every night thing. But I have no reason to believe he can't be an aggressive player consistently. He's shown it in flashes. There have been spurts. Go back and watch the great game he had against Denver where he had 30 points. Go back and watch that game. Go back and watch the game against the Bucks where he had over 30 points again, or close to 30 points again. It's inside. He's got that ability. It's how can the Cavs harness it? How can the Cavs bring that out on a regular basis? That's one of the biggest questions I have about this team. And if they can do it, Evan Mobley's going to be a star. He is. Because he's that good defensively already. And he can do things you cannot teach on that end of the floor. It's just getting there on offense. If he does that, we're talking about a player that's going to be an all-NBA player. We're talking about a player who's routinely, we know, going to be in all defense conversation, defensive player of the year conversation. We're talking about a perennial all-star. By having a good year, That's what Evan Mobley has to gain this year. We know Darius Garland, he had a bad year last year. I've called it a nightmare of a season several times on this very show. That's why I think he has a lot to gain this year on the Cavs. We're going to talk about that next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is my favorite place to go when I need tickets. The Cleveland Guardians, the hot ticket in town right now, they've got a nice lead in the American League Central. The regular season is winding down. We're getting closer and closer to playoff baseball. The Guardians have a magic number now, and they're back in town, and you might want to go to Progressive Field, check them out. You're going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to want to go to playoff games, but before that, I want to see this team wrap up the regular season in Cleveland. So what do? You go to Gametime, and that's where you find tickets, because they've got the tickets you want at the prices you need. And one of my favorite things that Gametime does is it offers you the ability to toggle on all-in prices. So when you're looking at the tickets on your phone, you see, okay, I'm not going to be bombarded with taxes and fees at the end. I'm going to see this ticket on my screen, and that's the price I'm going to pay. And as a consumer, there's nothing I love more than knowing I'm not getting tricked here. I'm not being misled to think that I'm going to pay this price, but really it's going to be 120% of that. No. Gametime, you can turn on all-in pricing, and you're going to be shown exactly what you're going to pay. Another thing I really like from Gametime is they will show you what your view looks like. When you are picking out seats at Progressive Field for a Guardians game, you want to know, okay, what's my view of home plate going to be? The Gametime app will show you that. How am I going to be able to see the walls? What about that ball that's hit down the first base line? Am I going to be able to see that all the way to the corner? Gametime is the place to go if you want to know what your view from your seat is going to look like. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKED NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out Locked On NBA. I was on there earlier this week, had a great time. You don't want to miss that show because they're keeping you informed and up to date on everything that's happening in the NBA all summer long. Training camp is getting closer. It's getting closer. We're less than 3 weeks out from the Cavs bouncing the basketballs at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. You want to know what's going on with Cavs? You might want to know what's going on with the rest of the NBA too. So make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So Darius Garland is player number 3 for me that has the most to gain this season. Why does Darius Garland have a lot to gain? Well, I think the conversation starts with how bad his season was in 2023-2024. The season that is gone, he has a lot to gain because that season was bad. Darius Garland was a shell of himself. He was not the player that we saw make an all-star team a few years back. He was not that guy anymore. Now, was it Darius's fault? I don't think so. It's not his fault that his jaw was fractured. It's not his fault that he had several injuries and just really could never find a rhythm last season. But he has a lot to gain by going out there and proving that he's still that all-star caliber player. That he's still the guy that can go out there and be a team leader. That he can still be the second or third best player on a really, really good team. On a team that goes deep into the playoffs. Darius Garland has that to prove. Because I do think across the NBA, there are a lot of people that are doubting Darius Garland right now. Because he's coming off of such a bad season. And I think turning that around, flipping that narrative on his career is absolutely a huge thing for him to gain. It 100% is. If he repeats the year that he had, just in terms of, just speaking statistically here, if he repeats the first year he had alongside Donovan Mitchell this year, I think his reputation looks much different. If he gets back to being an all-star caliber player, which that first year Donovan Mitchell was in Cleveland, Darius Garland was that. If he's that again, I think we talk about Darius Garland in a different light. And I think that's a really big deal for Darius. I think it's a really big deal for the Cavs. I think it's a really big deal. It's one of the storylines I'm watching across the entire NBA. So I think he's got a lot to gain by playing well. Now, what does a good year look like for him? I think it looks very similar to the first year, like I said, that he and Mitchell played together in Cleveland, where his numbers took a little bit of a dip from the All-Star season, but his usage dropped. So of course it was going to take a bit of a dip, but that doesn't mean he was any lesser of a player. I think there's an argument he was a better player. It's just that his volume was down a little bit. I think if that's what he looks like, Darius Garland has a lot to gain from a great year with the Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave a nice review. Tell a friend to subscribe too. Basketball season is around the corner. Friends don't let friends go without Cavs coverage. I'm telling you that. If you're a real friend, you're not letting your real friends go another day without Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure they're subscribed. Check us out on YouTube as well. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for me. Make sure you click subscribe and hit the notification bell too so you know when the latest Locked On Cavs content is coming at you. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first